We're reimagining the already spectacular gardens at Royal Roads University as a rejuvenating force for our whole community. Gardens that enhance our sustainability practices, preserve local heritage, and offer a place of refuge and beauty. To map out the garden's future, we must understand the stories of those who shaped them.
In revitalizing the gardens, Royal Roads University can really honor the past, present, and future of Indigenous people by recognizing and learning about what does reconciliation mean to them, but also what does reconciliation mean to the members of the community. And for that, the gardens will be able to gather people together to understand and learn about the history of the lands, understand how that impacts the present, and understand what they can do to create actions for the future. I am located on the Lekwungen Songhees Nation. I also want to acknowledge Kosatsin. This land was once a food source for the local nations. This is where they would come and harvest. This is where they would migrate to collect their traditional foods.
When the Europeans came, this was a Hudson's Bay farm, so it was contracted out. It was eventually sold to a man called Roland Stewart, and he was a bit of an entrepreneur. Like, he was involved with Radium Hot Springs. He wanted to set up tourism there, and his house went on fire here, which also took the heart out of him, so he sold it to the Dunsmuirs then. And when you think about it at the time, this was miles away from Victoria. Like, it was really moving away from the centre of action. On the other hand, I think even with a horse, you could probably get out here quicker then than you can now with a motor car. So when the Dunsmuirs bought it, it was to be the gentleman's estate, which is why the Dunsmuirs actually went to England while they were building the house or before they built the house to look around. And so they looked at these big estates in England and decided this is what they wanted. So when they built the gardens, Breton Hall put in an Italian garden, which they were very keen on because Hall had studied under a fellow called Charles Platt, who wrote a book on Italian gardens, still in print today. The Japanese gardens were becoming very trendy as well. The rose garden, a walled garden, which is where we're sitting now, and there's not many walled gardens in Canada yet, very common in England and Europe, where you would grow your food crops and you would have fruit trees all around. He put in the conservatory. This was a huge conservatory. Like, when you look at some of the European ones, that was the size of it. So they actually built an almost English-style estate here on the edge of the Western world, as it was then. When James died, I mean, they still sort of kept the estate up, but as even Laura got older, I think there was less and less interest in the gardens. And by the time it was sold to the military, of course, it was wartime, and gardens weren't really a priority. It was training the officers to go into the Navy. But I think the military actually saved the garden because they didn't do too much to it. They kept everything pretty much as it was.
When the military took over the estate in 1940, they immediately realized that importance. And they didn't set about to make any changes to the 4 gardens. Now, one garden was Rhodo's, and it was in the woods, so they didn't maintain that. But the other 3 they maintained in their concept form. And although they had fewer gardeners, the gardens continued to flourish. For the military, they became an important area for cadets to relax because it was the only non-attention area on the grounds. The cadets could find not only enjoyment in the gardens, but if they were so crafty, they might go fishing in the lower pond. Now, fishing was totally not allowed, but one story of 2 cadets who were caught fishing by the commandant, they only survived serious punishment because when the commandant found him, he was carrying a fishing pole himself. But when the college opened in 1940, the lower pond was used for survival swim classes for the Navy cadets who were learning enough Navy training to serve in the Second War. And the type of swimming they did there was survival swimming, so they would know how to swim with their clothes on after their ship was sunk. The Italian gardens, where we're today, have a memorial plinth donated in 1972 by the class of 1940 with the names of those cadets that were killed in the Second War and Korea. So the gardens is not only a place of enjoyment, it's a place of reflection and particularly the Italian gardens, where there's been a remembrance service continuous since 1972. The Friends of Hadley Park were able to create a museum in the basement of the castle when Royal Roads University was started in 1995. Tours for the public, events on the grounds, and information sessions in the castle were afforded to the Friends by the university. We're going to talk about today David Rutherford, who was a director in the Friends for many years. And under Royal Roads University organization, he was the manager of grounds. And very influential in conducting tours and encouraging the public to visit the gardens. Dave had an effect of creating a greater knowledge in Victoria of the Hadley grounds, because even though visiting was allowed on the grounds while it was a military college, the public didn't feel comfortable, I think, in attending. But as a civilian university, Royal Roads University has been able to attract many more people and diverse audiences, whether tourists or longtime residents of Victoria. One of the major projects that Dave did while he was head gardener was to remove asphalt which had been installed by the military in the Japanese garden. The military had placed this asphalt down because the cobblestones and the stones they felt was tripping hazard. But Dave had thought it would be more appropriate to replace it with what we have now, which is more natural and conducive to the overall aesthetics of the gardens. I think Dave would want the gardens to encourage people to find this a place of learning, a place of beauty. I would identify three aspects of the importance of these gardens. There's the simple historical aspect that they're Edwardian gardens, which cannot be found anywhere else in Canada. And coupled with that, the Japanese gardens and the Japanese-Canadian designers that created those gardens. The second aspect is that the gardens form a beauty for the grounds, which make Royal Roads University unique in Canada, in the world. And the third aspect is that these gardens create in the students, staff, faculty, and any visitors an experience which they will never forget.
This has always been a significant gathering place in the community. The Kusapsan and the Lekwungen First Nations people gathered and harvested here, and the deep history of this land is protected and honored today. The Dunsmuir family built their Edwardian estate on the land and had the formal gardens installed. And then for more than 5 decades, this site was a military college, and for the last 25 years, a university. Today, the land and gardens are a free and accessible backyard park where residents of all ages and communities come to play, dream, and heal. In order to honor this land's history and its inhabitants' stories, we are asking for the public's help. And that's why we've launched A Vision in Bloom, a community campaign to help us fund several important garden projects. We're building food production in the walled garden as part of our partnership with Feed BC. This will increase community food security and create a living lab for students and community members. We're expanding our apiary to protect the pollinators and support the health of the gardens and the environment. We're restoring the Japanese gardens to their former glory, and even more, creating a destination Japanese garden on the West Coast. We're protecting and upgrading the glasshouse, one of the last remaining heritage greenhouses in Canada, helping it to survive for generations to enjoy what was once only open to a privileged few. And finally, we'll celebrate how this place connects us to each other. The gardens at Royal Roads are a community treasure, and free for everyone to visit. In fact, each year, more than 20,000 people visit these gardens from around the world. And while we set aside budget for the ongoing upkeep of the grounds, your donations will help us to build up the gardens as a community resource. From beehives to benches and food security to a living lab, there are so many exciting initiatives happening in the gardens. So please join us.